Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this learning event organized by the European Forest Institute on taking stock of experiences in mapping investments in land use at national or subnational level. So my name is Adeline Dontonville, and I lead EFI's work on land use finance in the context of the EU RED facility. So the EU RED facility is an EU-funded program which ran from 2010 to 2023 and was hosted by the European Forest Institute. The EU RED facility supported countries in improving land use governance as part of their efforts to slow and reverse deforestation, and it provided technical assistance and facilitation to tropical forest countries so that they could find innovative approaches and solutions to their land use challenges in various areas such as finance and investments. And to do so, the facility developed over the years a number of tools, such as the land use finance tool, which will be discussed in this event. So our agenda for this event will take stock of EFI's contribution to the evolving field of finance mapping and share results of the most recent experiences in mapping land use finance specifically. So the event will start with a presentation of the EU RED facility and EFI's approach and tool to support tropical forest countries in mapping and tracking public and private investments relevant to land use. And then we'll move to listen to 3 case studies to learn how and for which purposes various countries across the globe have undertaken land use finance mapping at national or subnational scale over the past years, and we'll hear from different presenters about the results and the lessons learned from these case studies. So we'll first provide an introduction to land use finance mapping and the tool developed by EFI. In 2021, it was recorded that more than 600 billion of US dollars of climate finance were spent, out of which only 2% went to sustainable agriculture, forestry, and land use, despite the fact that these sectors represent a quarter of global emissions and up to 75% of emissions in tropical forest countries. Moreover, additional analysis highlighted the dominance of business as usual rather than sustainable finance when it comes to the even larger and more influential domestic agricultural budgets. Investments in sustainable commodity production or reducing deforestation are very small compared to financial flows that may, on the contrary, be contributing to forest degradation or deforestation. So the challenge faced by tropical forest countries is twofold. First, mobilizing new finance to achieve their goals, but also secondly, aligning existing public and private finance to their climate and forest objectives. EFI started its work on land use finance back in 2015, when the first countries engaged in RED Plus started reflecting around investment plans and resource mobilization. So EFI partnered with the Climate Policy Initiative to assess the level of knowledge and transparency of existing sources of finance, and that led to the joint development of the land use finance tool based on CPI's expertise in mapping climate finance. So why mapping land use finance? It can actually support countries to understand the existing landscape of land use finance and provide an analytical basis to support better planning, alignment, and resource mobilization. And this can all help answer the following key challenges in land use, which are: what are the main financing gaps, opportunities, and priorities? How to align unsustainable investments to forest and climate objectives, and overall, how much money has been spent on reducing deforestation over time. So countries can benefit from taking a critical look at their current spending to realize efficiencies, as well as making the case for accessing new sources of finance. And this analysis can be done through a land use finance mapping exercise. The diagram that you see on the screen is an example of visualization of land use finance mapping called a Sankey diagram. And this offers both a quantitative and qualitative picture of the life cycle of public and private financial flows. This diagram is one of the visual tools that can be used to convey the main results to a broad audience. So starting from left to right, it allows to break down actors into by sources of funding, including public actors such as government, agencies, development finance institutions, but also private side sources such as banks, investors, funds, corporation, households, or project developers. Then instruments through which land use finance is channeled can also be identified, such as grants and different forms of debt and equity. Beneficiaries and disbursement channels into specific uses are also identified through this analysis. So this spaghetti flows that you can see represent the volume of finance based on the thickness of the flow. And the colors illustrate some potential qualitative filters. In the case of this picture, the green flows are representing investments which are aligned to climate and forest objectives, while the gray ones are potentially driving deforestation. So the land use finance tool, which was developed jointly by EFI and CPI, provides guidelines, templates, and case study example to support any countries and their partners in conducting land use finance analysis. The tool provides a standardized approach to land use finance mapping, but in reality it can really be tailored to specific needs and objectives. It is composed of 8 modules as shown on the slide to represent the various analytical steps involved in developing a land use finance mapping analysis, and these can be approached either in a linear way or independently. Importantly, the first step, which is scoping the project, will clarify what needs to be included in the land use finance mapping. And the scope is very important to define carefully, as the availability of information needs also to be taken into account. Some of the key questions include, of course, what is the policy framework that is considered in the analysis? This could be as broad as the national climate change or sustainable development policy, but could also be much more specific, focusing on a specific sectoral policy or strategy, targeting a single driver deforestation or specific supply chain. The geographical scope and the scale, studies can be conducted at national level, at subnational level, at regional level. The analysis, the period that the analysis should cover, it could be a single year study or multiple year, the sectors of interest, and the sources of finance that should be included. Originally, finance mapping focused more on public sources, but increasingly, as we will see, there is interest to also look at private investments. Another key feature of the land use finance mapping approach is to identify not only investments which support sustainability or climate objectives, but also those that drive deforestation and forest degradation or unsustainable land use more broadly, or increase the risk of unsustainable land use. And to do so, an important step in the analysis is to develop a typology or a taxonomy of the investments considered in the scope of work and their alignment to relevant policy objectives. So depending on the scope and the objective of the study, one might wish to develop definitions of investments that are aligned under specific conditions, that are not aligned, such as the example you can see on the screen, which comes from the study conducted in Papua New Guinea. And of course, here the context is king, and understanding whether specific activities are in line with particular policy objectives is very important. In addition, the tool has been enriched by additional studies to increase the understanding of how private financial flows could be also integrated in the mapping exercise. So back in 2021, EFI partnered with the UN Environmental Programme to develop and provide additional guidance on private flows. So the framework that you see on the screen represents the range of possible financial services that land managers or land investors might have access to in different markets, and there as well, even more importantly, the specific country context and development stage needs to be taken into account to really scope the type of markets that can be analyzed when it comes to private investments in a given country or in a given jurisdiction. Here you can see a few examples of some of the countries that have been using the methodology with the support of partners like the UN Development Programme. So this is, for instance, Côte d'Ivoire, but also Papua New Guinea, Vietnam, Cambodia. And now we're going to find out about 3 other countries which just finalized recently the land use finance mapping exercises with very different scopes and objectives. So it's my pleasure to introduce the first case study, which will be the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And Dr. Andrianina Rakosotova, who is an associate consultant with Flora, Fauna and Man, a consultancy that supported the DRC government in conducting land use finance mapping. She has worked in the field of forestry, environment, development and climate change for more than 10 years now, is really an expert in this field in the environmental context in Africa. So let's hear now from the DRC.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrea Rakutsu, Associate Consultant within the Flora, Fauna and the Man Ecological Services, which is mandated by the DRC's Red Plus National Fund of FaunaRed to conduct a study titled Mapping and Monitoring of Financial Flows related to Red Plus in DRC and Estimation of the Cost of Generating an Emission Reduction. This study was supported by the European Red Plus facility through the European Forest Institute in terms of methodology regarding to the financial mapping flows. The DRC is the second largest tropical forest country in the world, with 90% of the forest area of Congo Basin. However, these resources are threatened by increasing deforestation and degradation, mainly from slash and burn agriculture, fuel wood and charcoal production, unsustainable logging and mining, which are linked to weak governance, population growth, unsustainable land use planning, and land tenure issues. So to address this driver of forest loss and degradation, the DRC National Red Plus strategy defined the strategic intervention which are implemented through the 5 years Red Plus investment plan with a budget of $1,040 million. However, only 200 million of it are secured through the LOS and with the Central African Forest Initiative CAFE in 2016. Firstly, recognizing the amount of financing mobilized or received by the country in the land use and Red Plus sectors, that contribute clearly to achieve the Red Plus objective or may contribute but with certain conditions or may drive deforestation and forest degradation. And secondly, given the big gaps in terms of financing to implement the Red Plus investment plan, the LOI seeks to align both public and private investments with the objectives of Red Plus. So this study contribute to this objective by providing tools to prepare this alignment policy through the quantification and analysis of the features of investment and financial flows related to land use and REDD+, and secondly, to estimate the cost of generating an emission reduction in order to assess the finance mobilization required to achieve the investment plan objectives. Regarding the scope of the study, sectors include those related to land use, having impacts on forest cover, and contributing to climate change mitigation. The study considers public finance from both domestic and international sources. Nature of financing include both operational costs and investment expenditures. Geographic scope of the study encompassed the entirety of the DRC, but a provincial level was considered given the differences in terms of natural context and dynamics between provinces. And finally, the study covers the period between 2009 and 2019. The mapping of the financial flows was based on the methodology framework provided by the European Forest Institute. It identifies 3 types of land use activities, including green activities, gray activities, and brown activities. However, with these best definitions, it was difficult to distinguish green activities from gray activities or gray activities from brown activities, given the limited capacity in national level to provide data regarding the effective application of safeguard measures to manage deforestation-related risks, or to provide data on the impact of each activity on reducing deforestation, as evaluation reports are mostly not available, or indicators are inexistent or not relevant to assess the impact of on forests. So, considering this context, this 3 level was applied for the DRC. So, all activities related to land use that may lead to or address deforestation and forest degradation are eligible. Green activities are those that pose no risks on causing deforestation or forest degradation. Activities that present risks, but sustainability and the safeguard measures are defined during their conception to avoid or reduce the risks, are also considered as green. And finally, activities that present risks and which need to consider sustainability or safeguard measures are considered as green, and these activities are those who need to be aligned with the REDD+ objective. This implies that green activities can transition to green if it demonstrates a contribution to climate change mitigation or improvement on forest cover. And the same for green activities. The development of the topology definitions and methodology has involved stakeholders' engagement. For that, regular meetings were organized with the FONARED and the European Forest Institute, to discuss on the primary results and also to receive technical orientations. And then results were presented to stakeholders through the national workshop organized on June for this year. Data was collected in 2 phases, online and through a mission in Kinshasa. For the first one, in order to obtain complete data as possible, data collection was initiated at the platform level. Then additional information was obtained from the websites of donors, fiduciary agencies, and the implementing partners. The phase 1 results indicated that certain entities, mainly bilateral donors, do not provide online access to data with the level of details required by the study, particularly data on disbursement. However, this access is crucial as overall there are notable differences between disbursements and committed amounts. So, the mission in Kinshasa aims at addressing these gaps with bilateral donors and to collect data from the government. This table summarizes the methodology adopted for data analysis. I just want to highlight that amount disbursed were privileged rather than amount committed, as the reason as mentioned before. However, committed budget was used when disbursement data was not available. It's worth noting also that data on the amount allocated for each project's component is important, as for one project, one component could be green while others could be gray. This Sankey diagram summarizes the financial flows related to REDD Plus and DRC. Between 2009 and 2019, almost $6.8 billion of public funding was disbursed, among which approximately 28% was green. About half of the financing came from domestic sources, which was channeled through technical ministries to ensure mainly their operational costs and some investments. 54% came from international sources. This latter consisted mainly as a grant and channeled to technical ministries, national public establishments, and NGOs. Regarding domestic financing, results shows that public expenditures execution is very low. Agricultural, energy for mining, and land planning sectors received the main financial support. However, most of these activities were gray as their sustainability or safeguard measures are not effectively considered. They mainly include agricultural intensification and development of infrastructure, development of hydroelectricity for mining industries, and the reinforcement of biodiversity conservation. However, green activities reached 46% of domestic funding. This high proportion of green financing can be explained by the fact that a large part of the financing was allocated to enabling activities for the operational costs for the ministries and not for other investment. International financing has reached $3.04 billion. However, this disbursement could be overestimated given the limited data available and then the use of committed amounts instead of disbursement. Energy, agriculture, and forestry are the priority sectors, representing 18% of the total funding. Green financing represents 54% of the funding and has supported mainly the development of alternative energy of fuel and charcoal, reforestation, forest restoration, sustainable logging, or development of sustainable agriculture and value chains, agroforestry also. Regarding the green financing, it has mainly supported the development of energy for mining, agricultural intensification, and infrastructure development, and also biodiversity conservation. Within the period of the study, as you can see here, domestic financing on land use planning, land tenure, and improvement of governance received significant improvement. However, financing for agriculture sector has widely decreased. And these last years, the government started to invest in rural electrification to reduce poverty and reduce the reliance on forest resources. For international financing, a transition to more green, sustainable, and integrated investment was identified in the agricultural, forestry, energy, and land use planning sectors. The analysis of financial flows by province reveals inconsistencies between funding received and the loss of forest cover. As we can see here, the 7 provinces with the highest forest cover losses, with darkest colors, have received only in total 15% of financing. And with the available data, it will be difficult to assess the level of influence of the typology of financing on the forest cover loss, given the other factors that come into play. However, the results constitute essential tools for decision making to identify sectors that have gaps in terms of financing and the level of effort to be made to turn gray funding into green in order to have the greatest impact on forest. Regarding limitations, one of the main limitations is the availability of data. For this project, almost 95% of data was estimated or using committed amounts, which do not reflect the real financial flows. In addition, only 6% of the project provided complete information, including project document and evaluation reports, allowing the effective monitoring of and the evaluation of the financial flows, and also providing data on the impact of each project on forest. Finally, different sources may present different information for a project, given that during the project implementation, additional financing may be received, adjustment of financing plan may be operated, however, the TMA available was not updated. In conclusion, the results provided relevant data to inform decision-making on efforts to be undertaken to encourage the government to increase the domestic investment and disbursement in the land use and direct sectors, to rethink about the priority actions, mainly for the development and scaling up of sustainable investments on the agricultural sector, improve and scaling up approaches for the alignment of green activities towards green, sustainable, and integrated investments based on evidence, mainly for agricultural, energy, and mining sectors. It is noted that few investment was received by the mining sector. However, it drives hectares of deforestation each year. The study also provides orientations on where and how to engage private sector investing in the land use and red plus sectors for more sustainability. And lastly, it serves as the groundwork for setting up and implementing a monitoring and evaluation system for forest-friendly and climate-finance investments, and as well as a coordination system to harmonize stakeholders' intervention responding to needs of each provinces. Thank you very much.
So now moving to case study number 2 of Ecuador. It's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Gabriela Arellano, who is an Ecuadorian economist with a master's degrees in environmental sciences from the University of Melbourne, Australia. And Gabriela has over 15 years of work experience in climate change, forest and biodiversity conservation, climate finance, carbon project development, ecosystem services valuation, and ecosystems and land restoration in Ecuador. So Gabriela will share with us the insights coming from that case study.
Hi everyone, my name is Gabriela Arellano, and today I'm really happy to share with you my work titled Mapping of Private Land Use Financing in Ecuador. This study has been performed by the European Forest Institute along with the Ministry of Environment of Ecuador. For this mapping exercise, we use the Land Use Finance tool. This tool was created by the European Forest Institute. This is why the main goal of this study was to identify financial flows that contribute to, first, the conservation of ecosystems and with a low incidence of deforestation, green flows. Second, theoretically friendly action but that might in a certain period of time move towards action with deforestation risks, gray flows. And third, the economic activities that contribute directly to deforestation, brown flows. The scope of the study was nationwide, gathered information from several actors. The sectors initially prioritized were forestry and agriculture. However, as part of the information gathering process, we identify 4 other sectors. These sectors are aquaculture, livestock conservation, and water. These sectors broadened the initial scope of our study to define more actors that were found in the information gathering process. As you might know, thanks to the other videos part of this webinar, one of the most important parts of the implementation of the land use finance tool is the typology construction. The typology aims to identify the actions in the land use sector in order to classify them in green, gray, or brown flows. For this case, we build the typology in some workshop with the staff of the Ministry of Environment, as well as we use different other sources, such as deforestation studies in Ecuador, statistics, the climate change activities catalog, among others. As you can see in this slide, we use a decision tree with different questions. For example, we ask ourselves, does the main goal of the program or project or action contain elements and criteria related to the sustainable environmental management and climate change actions? If the answer was yes, we went directly to the question in purple. Or if the answer was no, we went to the question in blue. This decision tree helped us a lot to classify the activities and to set up the associated flow for them. So one of the longest steps of this study was the definition of the data sources and the data collection itself. So basically, we did a mapping of actors. So this mapping of actors was based on the first part of the study, which defined the scope of the analysis along with the potential actors to gather information from. So basically, these actors map were NGOs, public sector, public and private banking, producers from different crops, coffee, cocoa, livestock, and the international cooperation organizations. So after we did this mapping of actors, the next step was to define how we are going to perform the information gathering process. So this part was composed of 4 important moments. So first, we developed an instrument to collect the information. This instrument was made through a tool called Kobo Toolbox. Then we did interviews, in-person interviews and online interviews as well. So we also gathered information from different sources, so secondary information basically. And finally, we did workshops on field and with different organizations in the Amazonia. So after the information gathering process and the typology construction, the next step was to build a database and to do the analysis. So with all the information that we gather on field and from several stakeholders, we basically follow 3 steps. So first, the land use finance tool guidelines were followed to construct the database. So I can say that this was our foundation to our work. So second, one of the biggest challenges was that the information was not homogeneous and all the information went through a cleaning process that was often done manually. So this step took us a lot of time. And third, in order to homogenize the information, several calculations and assumptions were made. When we had the database ready, we do the analysis. So with the process information, a preliminary round of socialization was carried out with all the information providers. So this socialization made it possible to receive feedback from all the stakeholders and including the detection of information that had not been initially gathered. And finally, the participatory socialization processes serve to enrich this analysis of the results. After the analysis and a second round of gathering information, we could feed the database with the last data. You know that within the land use finance tool methodology, the Sankey diagram is one of the most important milestones of this study. So as you could see, In this slide, the Sankey diagram represents a graphical and integral visualization on how the origin and destination of financing is distributed on the basis of green, red, and brown actions. Clearly, the financial institutions are where the greatest resources are channeled for this study, through credits for activities that are different from mitigation, adaptation, or conservation actions. You can see that the way of brown flows followed by gray flows related to agricultural, aquaculture, forestry, and livestock activities are activities that have or may have an impact on increasing deforestation rates, and that represents the credits played in the national markets. Green flows don't have a high representation for this study, as you could see in the diagram, but mostly the origin of these funds come from cooperation agencies, NGOs, climate funds, and government budgets, whose disbursement channel is through the central government of Ecuador, local governments, NGOs, social organizations for activities related to adaptation, mitigation, and conservation of biodiversity. It would be important that in order to do an update of this exercise, it would be interesting to collect the flows destined to green actions from the institutions that were mapped but information could not be received. We couldn't gather that information. So basically this diagram also shows that a large part of the resources are channeled through public and private banks for activities related to land use. So a public policy measure would be to promote financial products that support land use. So a public policy measure would be really useful to promote financial products that don't increase the agricultural frontier in line of REDD Plus objectives. So thanks to my previous slide, we did a really nice summary of the results of this study in Ecuador. You could see that in the Sankey diagram. So here I want to highlight 2 points that I didn't mention before. So the map volume of green flows is not higher because despite requesting information from institutions several times, we had little responsiveness to provide information for the study. So that's something that we need to tackle for the next studies like this. And gray flows are channeled through private companies related to organic certification and logging activities in native forests. So last slide, limitations and lessons learned. So we really wanted to highlight some of the most important ideas that we face along the developing of this study. So as I mentioned before, the largest distribution of financial flows in this study corresponds to credit. So you could see here the amount of money dedicated to gray, brown, and green flows. And of course, as I said before, green flows are really tiny proportion compared to brown and gray flows. One of the main challenges throughout the implementation of this study was to understand the tool, the land use finance tool, the methodology, and this has been like a really great challenge along this study because sometimes people within the ministry and another stakeholders outside the Ministry of Environment get confused or compare this tool with other financial mapping tools. So at the beginning, this has been really tough. So the development of the typology was of course the backbone of this of the implementation of this methodology, because basically from that definition we can't classify the flows. So this has been a challenge as well because this exercise didn't depend just on us. This exercise depends on the Ministry of Environment and staff as well. And of course, the typology affects all the rest of the steps: the gathering of information, the database construction, the interviews, and so on. And finally, it was defined that not all gray flows can necessarily be green or brown because they are not related to forest conservation or deforestation. So one of the proposals of the Ministry of Environment to solve this issue is the creation of a fourth flow to categorize this exercise. For instance, a blue flow. This is a really short summary of the study here in Ecuador. I'm sure that you have more questions besides the information that I already gave to you through this presentation. This study took more than a year, so we developed different kind of information. We have more things to do in the lesson learned and so on. So please, if you have questions in regard this study in Ecuador, don't hesitate to reach me. This is my email address, and it has been a pleasure to be part of this webinar.
And let's finally hear from Asia in Vietnam, where an interesting land use finance mapping exercise was conducted at provincial level. And Dr. Ha worked over the past month and years on this program. She has a PhD of Environment and Sustainable Development from the Vietnam National University in Hanoi. And Dr. Ha is an amazing expert in environmental and conservation finance. She has worked extensively on topics like payment for ecosystem services in Vietnam, as well as biodiversity finance. So she will now dig more into the work that was conducted at subnational level.
Hello everyone, I am Ha from the Vietnamese Academy for Forest Sciences in Vietnam. I've joined with EFI as a land use finance consultant to conduct a study of land use finance mapping for Lâm Đồng and Đắk Nông provinces with the technical and financial support from the EU RED facility through EFI to apply the land use finance tool in practice. This study also contributed to the UNDP-led project called Integrated Sustainable Landscape Management through Deforestation-Free Jurisdiction project in Lâm Đồng and Đắk Nông, Vietnam, or the so-called, also called the iLandscape project. So in this study, we used the land use finance tool to visualize investments in land use activities that have potential impacts, both positive and negative, on forest in Lâm Đồng and Đắk Nông, two provinces in the Central Highlands, which is a hotspot for deforestation and forest degradation for decades. That land use financial mapping aims to assist those provinces in designing and implementing necessary policies and measures to navigate investment flows and achieve their sustainable land use goals in the future. The study looks at actual spending of public and private actors in the agriculture and the forestry sectors, which were identified as the most related to deforestation and forest degradation in the two target provinces. In the agriculture sector, the study focused on coffee cultivation, since coffee has been identified as the leading industrial crop that may cause deforestation and forest degradation throughout the Central Highlands in the past, present, and future. All analyses were done for the period of 2016 to 2020, corresponding to the 5-year socio-economic development plan of the two provinces. This is also the period when Lâm Đồng and Đắk Nông actively implemented their RED Plus activities. Regarding the process, firstly, to identify which land use activities that reduce and which land use activities that increase the risk of deforestation and forest degradation in two target sectors, we firstly reviewed documents and consulted with a number of experts who have extensive experiences in land use in the Central Highlands to develop an initial list of sustainable land use and unsustainable land use activities in the agriculture and the forestry sectors. This list was then shared with the departments and agencies, such as the Departments of Planning and Investment, the Departments of Agricultural and Rural Development, etc., and the Landscape Project Management Boards of Lamdong and Dak Nong provinces. Accordingly, the list was finalized based on local partners' feedback. Regarding the data and information collection, for the public sector, in parallel with the process of typology development, we collected and reviewed a lot of relevant documents and reports published in the official websites of Lamdong and Dak Nong departments and agencies. We also designed and sent data collection forms to Lamdong and Dak Nong departments of planning and investment, departments of agricultural and rural development, and their subordinates, with the assistance of the UNDP Landscape Provincial Management Units. For the private sector, thanks to the support of IDH and SNV Vietnam, the two organizations which are running two projects on sustainable agriculture and sectors in the Central Highlands, we conducted interviews with selected households, communities, cooperatives, enterprises, input suppliers, product purchasing agents, and large import-export coffee companies to collect information on their investments into coffee growing models. All collected data and information were then classified and cross-checked to avoid double counting, and were analyzed in the form of tables and charts by using Excel and the Sankey chart. Okay, now turning to the key findings, the main outputs of the study are two land use finance maps for the two target provinces. As you can see from the figures on the screen, the total public and private land use investment that has impacts on forest in the agriculture and the forestry sectors of Lamdong province was around $421 million per year on average, of which private investment accounted for 96%, and 57% of the total investment went to sustainable land use activities and classified as green financial flow. 43% were for unsustainable land use activities and classified as gray financial flow. Meanwhile, in Dak Nong province, private investment was also dominant and accounted for up to 98% of the total public and private land use investment that has impacts on forest. However, only 21% of the total investments was classified as green financial flow, and 79% was classified as gray financial flow. The reason why Dak Nong's sustainable land use investment was so low is that between the two sectors, agriculture and forestry, investment in agriculture was dominant with 98%. However, investment in agriculture in Dak Nong mostly went to intensive and monoculture coffee models, which were identified as the top drivers to deforestation and forest degradation in the Central Highlands. Finally, I would like to discuss the limitations and lessons learned from this study. Speaking of limitation of the study, the first one should be the lack of detailed information of public projects or programs making it difficult to apply better methods to estimate public land use investment. For example, to use weight factors based on level of relevance of the public projects or programs to forest ecosystems. In addition, there are many land use investments that have ambiguous impacts on forest, which can be controversial when being classified as green financial flow or gray financial flows. For example, investment in agricultural cultivation on forest land. In theory, agricultural investment on forest land would be classified as gray financial flows. However, currently in the Central Highlands, authorities have policies to allow households to continue agricultural cultivation as long as households intercrop forest trees into agricultural cultivation areas to increase the provincial forest coverage. According to the Central Highland Provincial Authorities, investment in agroforestry models on forest land encroached for agricultural production was no longer a cause for forest loss, therefore should be classified as green financial flows. Finally, the estimates on private land use investment would have been more comprehensive if the sample size or the number of interviewed actors were larger. Regarding the lessons learned, the first one from the study is that a good stakeholder engagement plan is exceptionally important to attract the participant of stakeholders, especially the local partners, to be provided with sufficient and timely data and information needed for the analysis. Also, there is a need for a flexible data collection and analysis because almost data and information are scattered and stored in formats that are not yet ready for the further analysis. Finally, throughout the reading, understanding, and complying the instructions in the EU REGS Land Use Finance Tool are secrets to good orientations and time saving for the analysis. That is all for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any inquiries related to this presentation, please do not hesitate to contact me through the information here. Thank you.
So we have now reached the end of our learning event on land use finance mapping. As a conclusion, I just wanted to share with you a few resources if you are further interested into learning about the land use finance mapping tool or any of the case studies, the methodology, etc. You will find all the resources available on landusefinance.org website. All the resources are available in 3 languages, in English, French, and Spanish. And there you'll be able to see the detailed guidelines for each step of the process of mapping public land use finance, but you will also find resources to extend that type of analysis to the private flows. Some more details on the case studies that you have heard today, but also some of the older case studies that we described in the introduction, the results, of course, the lessons learned from all this work, as well as some more technical guidance if you would like to use some of the visuals that are helpful to communicate results, such as Sankey diagrams. So once again, thank you very much for joining this event, and please do get in touch if you have any further questions. Thank you.